Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be back to my alma mater, the University of the Basque Country. I'm also to be able to share some of my latest findings with all of you. Before I begin, I would like to express my gratitude to Janet Brennan-Croft and Dimitri Fimi for their useful comments on an earlier draft of this paper. The attention to detail J.R. Tolkien showcased in medieval scholarship, widely recognized for its influence on the discipline, did not diminish in his fictional writings. In the sequel to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien made significant additions to the prequel's revisited locations. Among this supplemental material, the cultural addenda to Rivendell bear ulterior significance. If the fate of the expedition is, in part, determined in The Hobbit's Rivendell, it can be argued that the destruction of the ring and the fall of Sauron could not have occurred without Rivendell's assistance in The Lord of the Rings. This paper will prove this often overlooked fact while it charts the cultural evolution of Rivendell from the prequel to the sequel. In the well-known letter to Milton Waldman, Tolkien wrote circa late 1951 that Rivendell is a kind of enchanted sanctuary, and that the House of Elrond represents law, the preservation in reverent memory of all tradition concerning the good, wise, and beautiful. It is not a scene of action, but of reflection. Thus, it is a place visited on the way to all deeds or adventures. In The Lord of the Rings, Rivendell continues to fulfill the same function as in The Hobbit, by providing the protagonists with the necessary supplies and allowing them to heal their bodies, rest, and prepare psychologically to face future adversities. In Rivendell, Bilbo gives Frodo two items that will greatly aid him, directly or indirectly, in the quest of the ring: the magical sting and a mithril shirt of mail. However, the change in status that Rivendell undergoes from The Hobbit to The Lord of the Ring is motivated in part by its strengthened cultural value. Readers are given an incipient sample of the cultural memory preserved in The Hobbit's Rivendell when Elrond teaches the protagonists the names and history of the swords Orcrist and Glamdring, and how to read Thrall's map. The adventure is after that point constrained by the spatial temporal dimension of finding the secret entrance to the Lonely Mountain by the last sunrays of Durin's Day, whenever there is. This is only established after the cultural custodian of Rivendell, Elrond, uncovers and renders the maps moon runes into common speech, which has both direct bearing on the meta-narrative and intra-story levels. Elrond advises Gandalf, Thorin, Bilbo, and the party of dwarves on what road to take and how to enter the Lonely Mountain. In The Lord of the Rings, the stored knowledge is suggested to be even greater, and counted tales are saved from being forgotten in Rivendell, as those Aragorn recalls about Gandalf. There are tales in Rivendell of greater deeds of his than any that I have seen, and Frodo is under the impression that in Rivendell there was a memory of ancient things, many of which have practical applications. For instance, as Julian Eamon explains, Sam and Frodo learned from Bombadil in the Old Forest that Middle-earth magic is dependent on poetic speech and songs, but they yet lacked both the Vial of Galadriel and the lyrical words that could cast the light of the two trees of Valinor and help them overcome certain obstacles, such as Shelob and the Watchers of the Tower of Cirith Ungol in Mordor. It is in Rivendell where they learn such knowledge by paying heed to Bilbo's song Earendil was a Mariner, and the elves' performance Elbereth Githoniel, which buried deep in their subconscious minds while both are either awake or in the realm of sleep. This knowledge can be retrieved in emergencies as a last resort, as when Sam is about to be slain by Shelob. He heard voices, far off but clear, the music of the elves as it came through his sleep in the hall of fire in the house of Elrond. Githoniel a Elbereth. Furthermore, the fact that Rivendell, in Tolkien's words, is a place visited on the way to all deeds, assures a stream of visitors of diverse provenance who can supplement Rivendell's physical and oral repository with distant tales and lore, as it happens during the Council of Elrond. Thus, though we are never told how, it is unsurprising that Gandalf, Bilbo, and the party of dwarves plans were improved with the best advice in The Hobbit's Rivendell. In The Lord of the Rings, instead, the extensive 2 chapters set in this wooded area provide the Fellowship with explicit, indispensable information and advice to succeed in their perilous mission. All things considered, I acknowledge that there are many intricate and interconnected reasons for the Free People's eventual success in the War of the Rings. However, as this paper has made clear, Rivendell is both an essential cultural stronghold and facilitator of victory. Unlikely as it is that Bilbo and the dwarves would have found the secret entry to the mountain without paying a visit to Rivendell, the chances of Frodo surviving the Morgul Blade and setting off to Mordor with the right equipment and company are next to naught with no Rivendell in sight. With no cultural center which preserved the lore and artifact of Gondor's and Arnor's former monarchies, no unifier king could have been restored either. And without a strong ruler, the final battle of the War of the Ring and its aftermath would have resulted in even more dramatic consequences, if not defeat. Tolkien's phrase, visited on the way to all deeds, or adventures, encapsulates best the Aragorn-Rivendell relation. Rivendell preserves Aragorn's past, present, and future, and it becomes an unending source of inspiration throughout his life, but especially during the War of the Ring. It is in this sanctuary where Strider casts his rags, sobriquet, and all wandering life aside, and Aragorn begins to transit into his future king persona. I hope that this incisive paper nudges other scholars to reconsider Rivendell's cultural relevance, as well as spark a debate and further research concerning Rivendell's centrality in this regard within the wider context of Tolkien's entire legendarium, not just his 2 best-known published works. David D. Overhelman succinct depiction of this aspect of Rivendell may provide a starting point. Elrond establishes this refuge to gather the last of the Noldor in the northern half of Middle-earth and preserve their wisdom and lore, both oral and written, within his refuge. In the Hall of Fire, the ancient songs, tales, and other oral traditions of the First and Second Ages are replayed, but Imladris also holds a large cache of maps, books, and manuscripts the Noldor have managed to retain after the destruction of Beleriand and Eregion in the Second Age. Oberhelman's brief extract offers a glimpse into Tolkien's wider legendarium, not just the Lord of the Rings. This or similar lines of inquiry that contextualize Rivendell's growing cultural value in the history of Middle-earth are worth pursuing. An expanded version of this paper has already been published, open access. It contains full bibliographical references and additional details. If you're unable to find it online, please email me at andoni.castillo@ehu.eus, and I will promptly send you a copy. Thank you so much for your attention.